The time is 8:04 p.m. on February 20th, 2020 in the great state of Texas, and it is also 9:04 p.m. on the East Coast. My name is Mickey, and I'm the producer of the Backyard Bullshit podcast, and I am joined tonight by Cool Hand.
How's it going, guys?
And folks, the reason I mention what time it is on the East Coast is that we have a very special guest tonight, and please give a warm, huge, Texas-sized welcome to FivePoints Videos.
How's everybody doing?
All right, well, let's get this shindig started. Now, Mr. FivePoint Gaming's, we are a Dallas-based podcast, and despite that, a lot of our co-hosts like different teams. So for you personally, who are your teams that you follow?
Well, in the NFL, I am a long-suffering Giants fan. My dad is from New York, and so I kind of took on pretty much all the losing New York teams except for the Jets. Like, the Giants are the only team that have won anything. But I also like the Mets, the Rangers, who haven't won since I was in high school, which is a long time ago, and the Knicks, unfortunately. And then to top it all off, the weird thing is, even though my dad was from New York, he was in the military, I was born in Alabama. I'm also an Auburn Tigers fan for football. And then for college basketball, my alma mater, VCU, is my team. So I got a complete mixed bag of squads there.
What do you think about Tommy Tuberville running for Senate?
Tuberville was a good coach while he was there. He kind of got screwed with a couple bad seasons, coming off a couple scandals and stuff. But I'm not really involved. I don't really like to get involved in politics. I mean, I have opinions, obviously, and most of them center around anything that bothers me. I usually have an opinion if it affects my life, like, say, the Second Amendment, things like that. But really, I don't really try to pay attention to anything else, though.
Fair enough.
All right, Cool Hand. Well, that was my opening question. Cool Hand, do you have any questions for Mr. FivePoints Videos?
So where are you based out of currently?
I'm on the East Coast. I live in Virginia.
Okay.
The wonderful Commonwealth of Virginia. And it's because my dad ended up at the Pentagon at the end of his military career. And I grew up in Northern Virginia, but then I prefer the more southern central area. Northern Virginia is too much like a city now.
Well, that's kind of my opener. Mick.
Well, Mr. FivePoints Videos, you are a YouTuber by trade, and I was curious, what was it that propelled you to get into the, some would argue, dumpster fire that is YouTube? Did you just have an opinion you just needed to get out, or did you just think of, do you view video editing as a hobby?
It's actually a lot. I hope you have some time. I think we have an hour and 15 minutes. I'll give you the whole origin story. So back in, 2012, I was a healthcare executive. I was vice president of sales and marketing at this laboratory, and I had like 40 employees. I was a very giant asshole was what I was. Like, I fired so many people, like I've lost, I counted up the other day, I was like 22, 23 people, and I would say if I ever get good at firing people, then that's when I need to quit. Well, I got good at firing people, and I should have just quit. But then instead of quitting one day in late 2012, that was taken care of for me. And our company had been bought by this other big company, and then they wanted to reduce costs, and they were like, hey, you look like you make a lot of money, and we don't need you, so why don't you pack your shit up? And so I was laid off, and I'm sitting here like, I hear people make a lot of money on YouTube, right? Just in this whole not that was kind of in the back of my head, but I wasn't thinking it was a career. I was just more like I'm bored, right? So I was playing a lot of Madden, and I was having a lot of trouble defending screens. And I went to look and search because you can look for plays like there's always a tip guide or something. And I found this video of this guy, Mr. Golden Sports, and he wasn't even giving away tips. He was just commentating on the game, and I thought he was hilarious. Like, and I was like, all right, I think I'm funny, and I'm pretty good at Madden. And it was easy to figure out. It's like, okay, all you need is a capture card and basic editing, and maybe a microphone. And I think I can make videos. And this is 2013 when I launched my channel, and I had no idea how really difficult YouTube is, right? Like back then, it was more you just thought that if someone big gave you a shout out, like you would become a famous YouTuber. You didn't actually have. At least I thought you didn't have to actually be good at it. But then, after struggling for, I don't know, 3.5 years, I think after 3.5 years, I only had maybe 1,000 subscribers. Like, I was bad. It's kind of like do you know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's where people that are new at something really think that they're great at it, and people that have been doing it for a while think that they're terrible at it. And it's sort of this growth curve that you go through where you have that sort of chutzpah to try something new, and then you do it a little bit and you think you're great at it, but you have no idea that you're actually bad at it. And so I see that in a lot of so I'm a member of these groups on Facebook where people talk about how to grow on YouTube, and I see that in a lot of newcomers to YouTube is that, and it's evidential in me too. Like, you think that you're great, so you continue to put out content, but you don't know how really bad you are. So one day after, let's see, 3.5 years of putting out content and not really getting anywhere, I was like, I wonder if I just really try at a video versus talking over me playing a game. And I put together this video. It's called ex NHL captains who will never captain again, I think was what it was called. And that video got like 40,000 views in only a matter of a couple of days. And I was like, oh, I must be onto something here. So I stopped doing gaming altogether, and I just started writing these like scripted out videos where I could really, explain to the audience what I was thinking and do research. And then it just kind of took off from there. And then after about 2 years of really trying, I was able to make enough revenue off of YouTube to the point where I bounced back. Obviously, since 2013, I was the vice president of marketing again at a different laboratory, but I found myself going into work thinking about videos like all day. And then I found myself doing videos at work and not even caring about my healthcare job. So just one day I came in and I was like, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to resign. And that was almost 2 years ago. And now YouTube, I went from being a healthcare executive to telling dick jokes on the internet in the span of 6 years. It's about how long it took. So there's really no overnight success in this field.
I don't think any YouTuber would disagree with that statement. Cool Hand, what do you have for Mr. 5-Point Videos?
Where do you develop all your ideas for the videos?
Oh man, that's a great question because I am constantly thinking of ideas for videos, and they come from just different places. But what I do is if I'm walking somewhere and I just come up with an idea, I put it in my notes file on my phone, the notes app. But a lot of times, if you just listen to sports, radio shows, if there's a current topic, like I'll listen to their take on it and be like, all right, a lot of times I just think differently than a lot of the mainstream media. And I'll be like, all right, that's an interesting topic, but let me put my spin on it, right? or let me put my style on a certain topic. But there's I guess there's a lot of influences where, like with the stadiums, like I've been in love with stadium engineering since I was, I don't know, 10, 9 years old. Like I used to build stadiums out of cardboard and tape on my own. Like I would just try to figure out how they worked and stuff like that, or like mini. And that's why I'm surprised I didn't become an engineer, but I also understand, like we talked about earlier, I'm just not very good at math. So I it becomes this sort of in between where I get to appreciate it and write and talk about it, but not actually have to do it. But yeah, I have so many ideas, like, and I keep them all in this huge spreadsheet. I just never seem to run out of them, which I'm very thankful for. Is that as soon as I think of a topic, I write down the title and then I think about, okay, how do I fit this into the upload schedule? There's a lot of it. Like here, I'm just looking at the list. Like some of them are stupid and they don't make it into production. Like why do bats break? Like yeah, okay, that's stupid. Why can't NBA superstars coexist? These are all questions that I'm trying to find someone that has a general knowledge of sports would be interested in hearing about. Like the Redskins, here's one. I'm going to make this video. The Redskins have the weirdest stat in the NFL. Like I think over the last 4 years, they've given up a touchdown with no time remaining like 6 or 7 times in the last 4 years. Like that's just crazy that they would do that. Like in one game, it like cost them a playoff bid or it sealed the game. So those are like interesting things that I pick up on, and then as soon as I get the idea, I just write it down so that I can put it into production whenever it's time.
Fascinating. We'll get into your videos a little bit later, but I personally wanted to know, you mentioned sports takes, specifically how you disagree with a lot of the mainstream media outlets when it comes to sports. Or at least, maybe not disagree, but maybe you have a different mindset that they do. My question is something I've always wanted to ask a sports YouTuber is, what is either the worst take from a sports media person that you've ever heard, or is there a take that you just flat out disagree with that's not necessarily a bad take?
I think most of what comes out of Nick Wright's mouth is him saying that LeBron had passed Jordan as the GOAT several years ago was literally the stupidest thing I've heard someone that gets paid to talk about sports actually think or say. But at the same time, you know, sometimes I tweet out things knowing that they're not exactly correct, but I know that they will rile people up. And I think that that's what Nick Wright is doing. He's just, I can't think that he really believes the dumb shit that comes out of his mouth. And unless he does, which makes him even more fascinating to me that he could really believe that. But that's one that stands out in particular and a lot of what's, you know, the thing is though, is the more that I've gained traction as a following, the more I've discovered that it's really easy for someone to pick apart everything that you say and make you sound dumb, or just have a bad day and also say dumb things. Like it's amazing that the more that comes out of your mouth that's captured on tape, the more you can sound dumb over time.
Now you mentioned,
but like go ahead.
Well, you mentioned Nick Wright as a consistently dumb person on ESPN. I was just wanting to know if there was a take.
He's on Fox.
Oh, he's on Fox?
Yeah.
Well, my bad. They kind of blend together after a bit.
Yeah.
Well, they got rid of Chris Carter, who was on his show.
Who?
Fairly recently.
Who?
Chris Carter.
Chris Carter, the old football player.
I'd have to look him up. I gotta admit, I don't pay attention to Nick Wright's show for the reasons 5-Point Videos just stated. But I was wondering, 5-Point Vids, is there a video, is there a take that you don't necessarily think is bad, but you just wholeheartedly disagree with? You mentioned Nick Wright's LeBron take.
The ones that bother me that is, you know, people saying that Eli Manning's not a Hall of Famer, that he got lucky, twice, that it was his defense. Like, from people that have never looked at film and have never seen how intelligent he actually is as a quarterback, like that's kind of, those are the more bothersome takes. But I also laugh because, I know that Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer. I know that he was a good quarterback for a long time. And I can see how teams that have failed in the time span that Eli Manning was a quarterback would be upset that this goofy-looking dude from Mississippi won 2 Super Bowls while they did not get any in that time period. So that's where and I'm not speaking to Cowboys fans directly. I'm speaking more to Redskins fans that seem to hate Eli Manning unjustly for unknown reasons. Cowboy fans seem to have a little bit more respect for Eli than, say, Redskins fans. But I could be sampling a smaller. I could have a smaller sample size. Yeah, Eagles fans too. Like, I don't. It's an ignorant take to call Eli Manning a bum. That's another thing, like that. Like, I see Carson Wentz play, and that boy can play. I see Dak Prescott play, he can play football. You don't have to be it doesn't matter the team that you support. When you say dumb things like that Eli Manning's a bum, that's clearly just a biased opinion.
As a Cowboys fan myself, I must say, the take that Eli Manning is not a Hall of Famer, I do find ridiculous. I feel like, though, and we can discuss this later, but I think history will validate Eli Manning's career, and I think that's due to the damage he caused to Tom Brady's legacy, on top of already being a very, very good quarterback.
Yeah. I think it just take time. People will start to forget the last 3 years when he wasn't that good. But a lot of things that people don't really appreciate is in that second Super Bowl run, just how good he was. He was lights out that whole all 4 games that they won. And he was Super Bowl MVP, but he doesn't even get enough credit for what he did. He did throw a lot of interceptions in very bad times as well. Don't get me wrong. It was not easy sometimes watching Eli Manning make really dumb decisions, like right before halftime. But as a Giants fan, you came to appreciate him and the effort that he put into being the New York quarterback.
Very much so, very much so. Cool Hand, did you have another question for Mr. 5-Point Videos?
I guess what would you say is your favorite video you've ever done?
Ah, damn it, I was going to ask him that.
Oh, that's a great question. So the most viewed video, hold on one second, sorry. The most viewed video is one where I ask about, whether you can keep an NFL football that goes into the stands. And that one is all right, but then it was like kind of in this time period where I was putting out content and I happened on the formula, but I didn't really shore up the quality necessarily. And I also had a full-time job while I was making those movies, so I would record in this big room on a Saturday when my wife was out shopping or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that one, it just has a catchy title, but my favorite video now is the one on why every dual-use stadium failed. That idea just kind of came to me. Like, I just noticed one day that, Oakland Coliseum was going to be the last dual-use stadium, and then I was like, I just discovered that each one of the other dual uses have all been destroyed on top of that. I was like, this is good. Like, there's something to this. Like, why did every major city do this 30, 40 years ago, and now it's just not done at all? And that just sort of spun into it, and that video took off like right away. And that's a really good feeling when when you put in some hard work and you think a video is going to do well, and then it really just kind of takes off.
All right. Well, Cool Hand, I think you and I should ask Mr. 5 Point Vids one more question, and then we can just dig into general sports topics. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect.
All right. Well, Cool Hand, since you took one of my questions for 5 Point videos, I'll ask my last question then. Is there a video that you made on your channel where you're just surprised it got as much views as it did? Like you mentioned the football one.
Yeah. The answer to that is all of them. Like I'm very surprised like every day that people give a shit about my videos, number one. But I'd say triggering all 32 fan bases, like that one, like I did that as just like I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do a video where I just piss everyone off. And I thought that it would just be dismissed very quickly and would not have taken off. And that one just blew up from the moment I hit upload. And I was like, oh my gosh, like people, I'm so surprised that people want not only you to insult their teams, but go all the way into them, like find the most painful things about their team and bring it up and throw it in their face, and they're like sadistically enjoy it. Like I've never been so surprised that that's what people are after. And yeah, there's a lot of negative people. You know, 9 times out of 10, someone's like "F you" in the comments. But for the people that just love the torture like that, it's, I don't know. That's where I kind of discovered that cruelty has a very wonderful place on YouTube.
YouTubers, especially the commenters, are a very masochistic bunch. Cool.
They're also, yeah, if you want to take Nick Wright, chop off 100 IQ points, and then make him 10 years old and put him in a basement somewhere, that's like usually the average intelligence of a YouTube commenter. But there's also other ones that are brilliant that make me laugh my ass off. And then there's also other ones that are really appreciative, and I try to seek those out. But it's also funny now to receive hate at 230,000 subscribers and just be like, whatever. And then when you had 1,000, though, get into a full-on argument with a 14-year-old about, Madden.
Oh, what a strange life you must live.
It is odd. Like, I work from home. I just get up. I come into the office. I've got my Xbox set up to the left of me. I've got 2 huge monitors. I've got all this lighting, and I've got my own little office, and it's very different than going off to an office building where you have to argue about someone eating your sandwich in the fridge, and then sitting down at your cold desk and wondering if your CEO is going to bother you over some sales figures. And it's a lot different, but I absolutely love it. And there is a flip side to it. I mean, sometimes I get burned out. Sometimes I feel not as excited to make videos. But those are champagne problems compared to, wondering whether you're going to get laid off on a Friday because the sales numbers suck. So
I'm going to ask you about that champagne problem descriptor you gave us a little bit later. Cool Hand, what is your final question for 5 Point Vids?
Mine's about how long does it usually take you to make a video?
Oh, that's a great question. I was hoping you would ask me that. So for every none of these videos are actually easy to make. Like it takes a while to produce just one video. So for the general rule is about for every minute of film that is being shown, there's about an hour of work behind it. So my process starts with an idea, then the research phase where I start gathering information, then the script writing, or sometimes I'll have my writer Will Keys. He writes about half the scripts for me. But again, it's just, even for him, it takes a while to research and write. So the writing phase, I kind of break it down to tasks. Like I'll take 1 day to write the video. And then there's part 2, which is the gather, where I have to get all the footage and the B-roll and really kind of think of how that script is going to turn into a movie. And then day 3 essentially is all editing, putting it together, plus the voiceover and the sound editing. And then just editing alone, it's a very tedious process. Like, you put together your footage and your voiceover and you have to match them up, and then you start adding all the bells and whistles and cleaning things up. So yeah, it takes about 10 to 12 hours to produce a 10-minute video, all in all, from start to finish. So that's why I don't really produce. I mean, yeah, you could say, I only do 2 a week now, sometimes only 1 a week. It's just because sometimes in that 10, 12 hours is very exhausting to do all of that.
As the person who edits this podcast, I relate to everything you just said 100%.
Yeah, it's funny how commenters that we mentioned earlier will think that it takes 10 minutes to put together a 10-minute video, and that's really just not, could not be further from the truth. Then the thumbnail, you start adding like the thumbnail and thinking it all. The one thing I love about YouTube is I get to use almost every skill that I've ever acquired in my career. But the thing I hate about YouTube is I have to use every skill that I've ever acquired in my career. Like, you have to be above average at almost everything in other fields where they'll dedicate someone's entire career to editing. You're doing it and making a thumbnail and, doing the voiceover talent and writing out the script. So it's so many things, and it's always fun and it's always interesting, but it's also, when you're just one person, it can be taxing mentally.
The editing process can be mentally taxing. That I don't think you'll ever hear an editor of any format say that it isn't taxing. So
yeah, there's no editor that's just like, oh man, like, I just can't wait to edit today. Like, the thing about editing is it's about the finished product, because if you didn't ever reach the finished product, you would never edit. Like, it's just so much tedium to get to that point. But it is, like I said, it's satisfying once you put up that video, and especially that the validation that you get having, a good month where the views are really rolling.
That's true. All right, well, shall we jump into general sports topics, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
All right, well, since we are a Dallas-based podcast, and you've previously told us you are a majority New York sports teams fan, I have to ask you, as a Cowboys fan, Jason Garrett transitioning from head coach of the Cowboys to the New York Giants, what are your thoughts?
I've never questioned his ability as an offensive coordinator or play caller. Like, I always saw, you look at the numbers, Dallas is always prolific offensively under him as a head coach. Now, he would turtle in big situations, and he would get conservative, but every offense, whether Tony Romo or Dak Prescott was running it, always seemed prepared and always seemed to get down the field, especially when the Giants needed a stop. Like, I would always fear Tony Romo and Jason Witten, just dinking and dunking all the way down into field goal range or a touchdown whenever they needed it. It was frustrating. So I think having him, an ex-Giant, Princeton guy, I don't really see him doing any worse than, say, when Ben McAdoo was the offensive coordinator.
Now, isn't it true was it McAdoo the one that benched Eli Manning for whatever reason, breaking his consecutive games played record? Or
Yeah, that was McAdoo. He was the off coordinator first, and I believe he had come from the Packers. And
sounds about right.
Then he was elevated to head coach when they fired Coughlin, which they should not have done. And then, in his second year, he benched Eli Manning at the end of it, which, it kind of made sense. They were seeing that Eli was getting old, but the timing was wrong. The timing was bad, and they didn't account for the backlash that would happen of benching a legend for Geno Smith.
Yeah, I think that was one thing that really hurt him was instead of putting in the rookie, I think if they put in the rookie, I think it might have been a different story.
Well, the
But
way
because they benched him for
the way McAdoo explained it was like he was told by management, "Hey, we're gonna put in Geno Smith, and then we'll ease into Davis Webb, who was the backup, and
I'm
then
a Texas Tech alum, so I love me some Davis.
yeah, and that's what Davis Webb had also heard. Like, hey, look, we're gonna put in Geno. He's gonna start, and then the fan backlash was so severe that Mara backed out of the whole plan and just put Eli Manning back in because Eli still had a little bit of throw in that arm. But then you saw the next year where he was just equally as bad, and then obviously this year it was time for Daniel Jones. But yeah, that's the thing. McAdoo, he kind of took the fall for Mara's bad decisions. Or he could have just dug in his heels and said, guys, this is a really bad idea.
Right. Yeah, got wishy-washy.
Mm-hmm.
As a Giants fan, now that the NFL season is over, your buddy and your partner in crime, almost, I've seen it been called in the comment section, Urinating Tree, made an effort to poke fun at you when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones over Dwayne Haskins. Now that the NFL season's over, and now that we have hindsight, do you still feel like it was a missed opportunity, or do you think, you know what, nah, Daniel Jones, he's my guy?
I like what happened with Daniel Jones. Like, I definitely was pleasantly surprised by him. A lot of other, like, Soft Drink Sports, he's a YouTuber that is also a Giants fan. One of the nicest guys just ever. He was like, dude, I'm really high on Daniel Jones. And this was like right after he got drafted. I was like, I don't know about it. The one thing that disappointed me was they didn't get the linebacker Josh Allen and a quarterback. They ended up taking I thought that Jones was too high at 6. But now in hindsight, maybe the Redskins do take Jones at 17 or we end up with Haskins. And honestly, Jones is a better product at this point than Haskins is. So I think we're better off. It's just it would have been nice to get a bona fide starting linebacker because now that's what we're going to have to do this year. It seems like we're going through the rebuild progression, right? You draft the talented running back, the talented quarterback, and now you start drafting on defense. But it would have been nice to get both of those pieces. And I guess I cannot be upset with what I've seen from Daniel Jones. He looks pretty good. The deep ball just isn't there quite yet.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you. Do you think you could have got Jones at 17 and taken Allen with the 6th pick?
Who knows?
Or do you think the Redskins would have taken him?
Like as a fan, I'm like, yeah, it would have been nice to get that, but that might not even be realistic, right? Like someone might have taken him off the board. Now, no quarterbacks went in between those 2 picks. Like all position players went, but that you never know. It's like it could be a butterfly effect.
Right.
It wasn't like the draft was stacked with quarterbacks either, like this year or next year's is going to be. That's also kind of a problem. So we really didn't know much about Daniel Jones coming into the draft. But these guys don't like Gettleman. Yeah, I've disagreed with a lot of things he does, but you can't get to unless you're Matt Millen or something. You can't get to the NFL and be a GM being a complete idiot, right? I would think, unless you're Vinny Serrato.
I know the Browns did try the baseball approach.
Yeah, Paul DePodesta. My dad actually met him. He's obviously a bright guy, but yeah, that was interesting that they did that. But as they say, fish rots from the head.
Right.
Now, as the combine and free agency nears closer and closer, sports outlets like ESPN are really hyping up Tom Brady's free agency. Do you guys think that he's just going to go back to the Patriots and Robert Kraft is going to back up a dump truck full of money to his house, or do you think Tom Brady's actually going to go to a different team?
I cannot see any scenario where Tom Brady goes to a different team. I mean, he's a Patriot. He's a Patriot for life. I think Belichick is tired of him. Belichick sees the end of the road. I think Robert Kraft is like, shut up, Bill. He is our quarterback. He's won us 6 rings. You need to just suck it up and put up with him being mediocre or bad in his last 1 or 2 years. Like that's the only realistic scenario I see. Now, it could be, again, absolutely wrong, but who's gonna? It's gonna be like Montana on KC. Like that just seemed odd to see that.
It doesn't look right.
Yeah, and it's not like they have someone just waiting in the wing, like a Steve Young, who every time he got onto the field was a badass. You know, Jimmy Garoppolo's gone. Like Brady successfully removed him as an obstacle. So I think he comes back. I think it's a 2-year deal, and maybe. In the second year, if Belichick's tired of him, he gets benched, like every other great quarterback.
So you're saying that Jarrett Stidham is not the answer?
As an Auburn fan who had to endure Jarrett Stidham for 2 years as the starter, like Stidham, yeah, he's athletic, he's fast, but I just don't see him being a guy that can move the ball in the Patriots system. He's not Tom Brady.
I do actually have him going somewhere else. I don't think he'll be back in New England. I think he wants to prove that he can do it somewhere else.
That could be possible.
He ends up with the Chargers?
Are you kidding me? The Chargers?
Well, he's from California. Phillip Rivers is gone. Now, they did say they're willing to start Tyrod Taylor, but
that's a stop.
Seems like asking a lot.
Yeah, that's not a solution either.
Yeah.
I would say, okay, if he was to not be a Patriot next year, I would say the Chargers probably the best chance of that happening, just the California connection. But again, I'm like, no.
Plus, they're moving into that new stadium. They need to get some of their own actual fans.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't even fill a freaking soccer stadium right now.
Yeah, I don't know what Dean Spanos was doing moving them to LA, but he, I guess he just wants to live rent free in Stan Kroenke's amusement park.
Go all New York Jets and LA Clippers on him, huh?
Mm-hmm. I believe sincerely though that the Jets try to win. They're just so bad at it that they can't.
Just can't get out of their own way.
Yeah. But what would we do?
Is the answer.
Yeah. What would we do if the Jets didn't suck though? Who would we have to laugh at? Like, it would not be as fun in the world without the Jets.
There's always the Bengals. There's
Browns. Always laugh at the Browns. Detroit. I'm thinking about making a video like who will not win a championship in our lifetime, and I would probably assume that the Lions will not win a championship. I will not witness them win a championship. I don't think the Sacramento Kings do either. I say 80 years. We give it 80 years, you know. I don't think the Kings would have won a championship.
Go all Chicago Cubs on them, huh?
Yes, very possible.
Yeah, the Kings had their shot in 2002, but then, well, some fans would argue that the reps got in the way. So,
well, yeah.
Well, since we're on the subject of basketball, you said earlier that you are a Knicks fan. If you are in the front office of New York, what is it that they need to do to become a contender like they were in 2012? Does James Dolan need to sell the team?
Okay, if I were in the front office, what I would need to do to join a contender is resign. That's what I would need to do. Just put in my 2 weeks notice and go work for the Clippers or something. No, Dolan, you know, the thing is Dolan doesn't mess with the Rangers because he doesn't know anything about hockey, and the Rangers have been, you know, they made a finals in 2015 and they or 2014, and they made a deep run in 2015. And they're, I would say, yeah, they haven't won since '94, but they've been successful, and they've had to rebuild and then get better. The Knicks are just a disaster because Dolan needs to separate himself and not be involved in anything.
Apparently, he doesn't know anything about basketball either.
Yeah, and so he just needs to stay away from the situation. Like he also, the team hired Scott Layden from the Jazz, and he just screwed the team over. He signed Allen Houston to this ridiculous contract, and then Allen Houston never played again. And that contract just really screwed the Knicks and has caused 20 years of damage, and this is where we are. But Dolan continues to just make dumb decisions. He hires David Fizdale, fires him after a couple weeks, and doesn't even give him a chance. And what do they expect? They were terrible, and they've also had a lot of bad luck. So it's many combination of things. But the only solution there I see is James Dolan just getting old and eventually dying is the only solution, because he's not going to sell the team.
Cool Hand has some very strong opinions about what I'm gonna ask Mr. 5-Point Vids. 5-Point, what are your thoughts on the Carmelo Anthony contract that New York Knicks gave him?
Carmelo was a talent when he was in Denver. He was a talent for the Knicks in his first couple of years. He also had a lot of holes in his game, never played defense, didn't really like sharing the ball, was a very me player, said he wanted to win, said all the right things that you wanted him to say, and didn't do any of those things out on the court. So I think that also set the Knicks back, signing Carmelo to an exorbitant salary and then really not even seeing him see that contract out. So they've made mistake after mistake after mistake. It's just it gets to the point where they're not even mistakes if you're a Knicks fan. It's just Tuesday. So
I call him melanoma.
Yeah, he was a cancer for sure. And it's not him as a teammate or as a person. I'm sure he's a fantastic guy, but like guys like Chris Paul are actual cancers in their behavior. Melo, just his style of basketball and his sort of self-deluded thoughts of his own ability is what held him back.
Now, what is it that is keeping you a Knicks fan, and what's preventing you from becoming a Brooklyn Nets fan, for example?
That's also a good question. I ask myself that like every day. My thing is like if you say you're a fan of a team, that's it. That's your team. There's no switching teams. You have thrown down with that team, and unless there's some type of unless there's some scandal or the owner like punched you personally or slept with your wife or something, like there's no reason to ever switch loyalties for a team. You said I'm a fan of this team, and that is my squad. Like, that's it. Unless, the only extenuating circumstance to that is if you were a fan of a team because they were the closest and then finally a team moved into your town, then it's okay. Like if you were an Orioles fan and then the Nationals, but lived in Washington, and then the Nationals come to town and you're like, all right, I'm a Nationals fan now. That's fair. But other than that, I said I was a Knicks fan. I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm with them for the good and the bad and everything in between. Every 20-win season from here till the year 2080, I'm in for. That's just because if they do happen to win a championship, you don't want to be accused of being a bandwagon. That's the worst thing that can happen to you in sports.
Yes, a lot of Golden State fans who were around during the We Believe era would 100% agree with you.
Yes. It's always fun to tease them.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Patriots fans are in the same boat. I didn't realize there were so many Patriot fans before 15 years ago.
Yeah. It's the thing that you can tell when someone is a diehard, like a before. The other thing, though, which is a little unfair to Patriots fans, is like they've been good for 20 years. Like
Right.
it's very conceivable that a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old who's now 30 would have only known the Patriots and not been and their success. The thing is when they suck. So I want to see you wearing that Patriots gear on Sunday when they're
When Tom Brady,
1-15.
Bill Belichick are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still rocking your
Your Aaron Hernandez
Patriots
jersey?
jersey?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear those guys make a killing.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd catch that. So, why are you a Mets fan as opposed to a Yankees fan?
Another great question. So my dad grew up in northern New Jersey, but before that they lived in I think Jersey City or some very close to the city of New York. And my dad was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan and was very heartbroken when they won the World Series and then lost the World Series and then left for LA. He was so pissed off, but he said he would never be a Yankees fan because he considered the Yankees to be the white-collar team of New York, and Brooklyn Dodgers was the blue-collar team, and my dad certainly grew up blue-collar. And though there's plenty of blue-collar Yankee fans, but that was his perception. And then when the Mets came, they were the National League team in New York. He said that was it. And then the first game that he ever showed me, I think I was 9 years old. He told me, he's like, look, I'm a Mets fan. You don't have to like them. I happen to like them. Do you want to sit down and watch this game with me? And I was like, all right, I'll give this orange and blue team a chance. It was Dwight Gooden was pitching, and in the first inning they batted around, and Dwight Gooden hit a double. So he was pitching that day and hit a double in that inning, and they were up like 9-0. I was like, I think I'm hooked. I like this team. And that was it. I've been ride or die since basically 1985.
Since we're on the subject of baseball, on the last episode, which is currently being edited, Cool Hand and our other co-host, Dealer, kind of traded barbs about the Houston Astros cheating scandal. And 5 you rather recently released a video saying that the Astros cheating is good for baseball.
Yeah, the scandal, the attention is good. Like I kind of say that in the video, because you're getting a lot of eyeballs on sport. You're getting a lot of attention. You have a good narrative now, right? Like everyone wants to see the Astros lose, and unfortunately, they're not going to see that very often. But say they do win a lot, everyone wants to see the Astros get fastballs in their ear hole. So that's like really good for baseball. Now, I want to be clear here, and I say this in the video: cheating and stealing signs with an electronic buzzer or not even a buzzer, but a decoding room where you're in a trash can banging and things like that, that is not good for baseball. You should not be manipulating the outcomes of games. Though, they're saying that a lot of people did it, etc. And I'm sure once the temptation of an Apple Watch came along and the ability to, equipment's so cheap, high quality electronic equipment, and these guys are millionaires. Like I'm gonna do a video probably in the summertime of could I replicate the Astros cheating setup with just going to Best Buy, right? And I think you could. I think easily. I think I could even make a buzzer system out of that. And but that's the other thing that's interesting about it is that the guys that came up with the system, they didn't employ the help of some like really smart people. Like if I was that rich, like how hard would it be to find an IT guy that could wire a helmet to have a buzzer in it? And you would never, like if it's in the helmet, come on, there's no way anyone would ever be able to figure that out. But they were smart enough to get away with it and steal a World Series, so good for them. But at the same time, it's like, all right, they are cheating scumbags.
You mentioned that you don't predict the Astros losing a lot next season. Do you think the Astros will go back to the World Series, or do you think the Yankees are going to be too tough to beat in the American League?
I think the Astros make the playoffs, but yeah, the Yankees are going to be tough. They got Garrett Cole now. They got Aaron Judge, who's hopefully probably gonna be healthy. Giancarlo Stanton might figure out how to lay off sliders, and yeah, I think the Yankees are going to be tough to beat. Now that's an even worse scenario to see the Yankees in the World Series. But you never know. Like last year, the Nationals came out of nowhere. It's the team that gets hot. Clearly not the best team because the Dodgers were the best team in baseball all year last year, all freaking year, and they got ran over by the Nats in the division series, and nobody saw that coming.
Yes. And with your New York perspective, I do want to ask an outsider this. The Rangers of the Texas variety. What are, as a Mets fan, what are your thoughts on the Rangers' offseason moves so far? Because they added a lot to their pitching core at the expense of some of their offense.
Anytime you add pitching, it's good, right? I think like the Mets made a World Series 4 years ago by just pitching and timely hitting. So anytime you put arms in there, the thing that with the Rangers is like, all right, are they really gonna come back? Is this the year? They're in a new ballpark. 2 years in a row they're out, even a strike away from winning the World Series. And are they ever just gonna get back over the hump? And I think the new ballpark's gonna help that. I think they're gonna want to spend money again on bolstering the team, but I don't know how quickly that happens. But I'd expect them to start getting in the playoffs here in a couple years. I don't know about next year, but who knows?
Now you as a Mets fan, you mentioned good pitching and timely hitting. The Mets do seem to have both of those things. Jeff McNeil is an example of a powerhouse in the offense. Where do you see your Mets going next season?
Hopefully the playoffs. I think that's what they're expecting. I think that's what most media pundits are putting them at. I think that's what Brodie Van Wagenen thinks that he's put together as a playoff roster. The real question for me, and it was an issue all last year, was the bullpen. Whether Edwin Diaz can really be a closer, because if he had just done his job last year, they would have been a playoff team. They have got some offensive firepower. They got Pete Alonso, and they've got Jacob deGrom, arguably the best pitcher in the National League right now. So hopefully it's the playoffs. You never know, though. Injury can riddle a season. Cespedes needs to come back and play, but they've got a young core of talent that hopefully they stay healthy and can continue to be successful, because they were very close last year. They blew a lot of games late that cost them.
I imagine those weren't easy to watch as a Mets fan.
No, especially the game where they blew a 6-run lead in the ninth, where I was openly questioning not intentionally walking Kurt Suzuki when he hit a grand slam that basically ended the game. Or was it a 3-run homer? Something. I don't even want to remember. But yeah, the most frustrating thing as a sports fan is to watch your team get in the position to win and then lose the game. It's one thing to get the crap kicked out of you, because if you're getting a tar kicked out of you in the first inning or in the first 3 innings or the first quarter, you're like, all right, I know what to do now. I can go watch Netflix and or start drinking or get high and just forget about this. But when your team is dominating, playing better, and winning, and then blows it in the last moments of the game, that's the most heartbreaking. That's the worst way to experience sports.
Grasping defeat from the jaws of victory.
Absolutely.
Well, before we wrap up tonight, I did want to ask you about the national pastime of Canada, which is hockey. And where do you see, like, how do you see the postseason looking for your Rangers, and what do you think is going to come out of the Western Conference?
So with hockey, it's going to be really interesting on how the trade deadline unfolds, right? Like the Rangers, I'm not sure whether they're buyers or sellers at this point. I think Chris Kreider is playing. In fact, he played really good last night in possibly one of his last games as a Ranger. And it makes economical sense to trade him. He's an impending free agent. They can't afford him and get something. But also, he's a big cog in the wheel. If they were to get to the playoffs, they'd need a top six forward. And Chris Kreider happens. It's like they'd almost be renting him for themselves. That being said, like I just can see the Rangers being sellers. They need too much on the blue line to really do anything, and if they make the playoffs this year, then that takes them out of the lottery, and they get older without getting better. Out of the Western Conference, let me look at the standings. It's the NHL is so wide open. You really can't just look at a team and say, "Oh, they're going to make a deep run," because last year you saw what happened. I mean, the freaking St. Louis Blues came out of nowhere. The Blue Jackets beat the Lightning, the team that won 62 games in the regular season. Like you can't tell with today's NHL who's actually the best team anymore. But I think the Stars could make a run. I think the Oilers, Connor McDavid is back to playing well. Draisaitl's playing good again. You just never know. I think the Blues could also make a run. It's all up in the air at this point.
Just got to get a hot goaltender.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, that's where St. Louis really has an advantage. Is Binnington seems to be able to handle the pressure of, June and July games.
What does it say about the NHL where most of the top teams, maybe even most of the top 5 or 4 teams of the Western Conference are in the Central Division?
With the cap in the NHL, like you're going to see that where some teams are just more competitive than others. The playoff format, I like today's NHL, the playoff format being how it is. It's not like basketball where the divisions mean absolutely nothing. They only mean something for travel. So it is interesting that those teams would come out of there, but hockey has a way of evening itself out. And I think it's okay to have a team come in as that second wild card and just get smoked by a much better team. But we obviously didn't see that last year. We saw an 8 beat the 1. We saw a 2 get down by a 7. The Flames were out in the first round. Like you just don't know because of the way the cap is, and it's like stock car racing with the NHL, and it's exciting. I love it.
Well, we do know you have to go pretty soon, so Cool Hand, is there a topic you'd like to discuss with Mr. 5-Point Vids before we close out for the night?
Just where do you think the direction of the NBA is going in? Do you think it's going to go back to being a West Coast heavy? Should they try to do like a top 16 playoff instead of conferences? Something like that.
No one was talking about making any changes until Daryl Morey fired up his Twitter account. Like everything was hunky-dory with them when they're perfectly fine taking human rights violated dollars. And now that they realize that, some fans, like Americans, actually have principles and things like that, that they're going to have to entertain their base of American fans because, China obviously is pissed off about one little thing, which, the NBA didn't have anything to do with. But that's how China is. They're like, oh, we're not going to support the NBA. Like the government, basically, what's his name? Deng Xiaoping can say nobody support the NBA and everyone does it. It's crazy. There's no independent thought there. But no, I think the direction of the NBA is they gotta rein in this new concept of superstar turnover. But I think it's just gone too far. Like I think it's irreparable at this point. Like there's nothing that they can do to fix how the CBA is because if there's a work stoppage or something, players have a lot of leverage now in the NBA, and which they didn't used to. They're making more money now, and they're calling all the shots. Like remember the last labor stoppage I think was 2007, 2008? No,
Something like that.
2009. Everyone was like, "Oh, the players got screwed with these max contracts and the salary cap." Who's in control now, though? Right?
Yeah.
The players.
And,
right.
well, especially NBA players have real control. Pretty much every other sport, it's the owners still have control. But the NBA, it's run by the players.
Yeah, it's inarguable that in baseball the owners are in control. Football, the owners are in control. In baseball, in hockey, it's kind of a mix. But in NBA, the players run the league. So it's I feel like the Western Conference is strong. It's going to be a great battle out of there, and I think it's Milwaukee's chance to get to the finals this year. I don't know if they can take on the Clippers or even the Lakers. I don't know if they're that good. They proved it last year. They couldn't even get past who went to the finals? For Toronto, the Raptors. Yeah. So, it'll be interesting, and I don't know how bad the Sixers want it, but I definitely enjoy watching them.
The Sixers are a fun team to watch, and we'll definitely see if they make it out of the second round of the playoffs this season. Well, Mr. 5-Point Videos, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we sign off?
Excuse me. If you're listening, please, watch my videos, or if you've heard of me, please continue to watch 5-Point Vids. Urinating Tree and I do a show called The Dumpster Fire that we do live every Tuesday as well. That's been also fun to develop and use to make over time, the other thing about that is like that's less stressful than putting together a video. Like we just go and a lot of the donations and super chats make it fun. Like we've let the audience control that show and that's fun as well. But that's all I have, and you guys were great. Thanks for having me, by the way.
It was
great question.
Thanks for being on. You were fantastic.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being our very first guest. It was an absolute pleasure to talking to you. And my name is Mickey. I'm the producer of the Backyard Bullshits podcast, signing off.
It's your boy Cool Hands. Stay great out there.
Again, a special thanks to 5-Point Videos for joining us this time. Check out his YouTube channel and his social media handles, as well as the stream he does with Urinating Tree. And we will talk to y'all very, very soon.